Welcome to PodBot, the future of podcasts.
All right, so Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. Huh. It's a complete unknown.
Yeah.
And he's actually singing. Color me intrigued.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot of attention.
And not just because of the casting.
Right.
We've got a whole stack of reviews to unpack here.
Yeah.
AP News, Time, The Guardian, even a little peek into the critical reception from Metacritic.
Okay.
So what's the mission for our deep dive today? What are we hoping to find out?
I think, well, we should go beyond just the surface level buzz, and really see what makes this movie so fascinating.
Yeah.
And especially look at what it tells us about Dylan's artistic journey, The whole controversial thing going from folk hero to electric rebel.
Yeah, especially since it sounds like Dylan himself was involved in shaping the story.
Right.
Makes you wonder how much he wanted to control how he was being portrayed, or maybe even set the record straight.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. The Time Review actually had a question about that. They were like, did Dylan read the script and think, yep, I was a jerk? Oh, interesting.
It seems like the film doesn't shy away from showing his less flattering qualities.
Like what?
Like the arrogance, the infidelity, the way he could push people away,
Yeah, but the Time Review called it thrilling instead of off-putting.
Right.
It's almost like those flaws are part of what makes him so intriguing.
Right, exactly. The AP News review really emphasized that this movie isn't just a straightforward biography.
Yeah.
It's more about capturing that aura of mystery that Dylan cultivated.
Okay.
This idea of him as a force of nature who reshaped the music world.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's still kind of an enigma.
Okay, so we've got the unconventional biopic angle, but let's be honest. The Timothée Chalamet factor is huge here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, not only is he playing Dylan, but he's singing the songs, too.
And he's not just like doing karaoke. He's really embodying Dylan's voice.
Wow.
That unique, The Guardian described it as stoner hungover bird song.
Oh, wow.
Stoner
hungover bird song. I love that. Yeah, and the reviews seem really impressed with his performance, praising the bravado he brings to the role.
Okay, so we've got Chalamet, but he's not the only one getting attention. The supporting cast is amazing.
Yeah, it's stacked.
Monica Barbaro as Joan Baez. Elle Fanning playing Sylvie Russo.
Right.
Who's based on Dylan's real-life muse, Suze Rodolo.
Yeah.
Even Edward Norton as Pete Seeger.
Wow.
And these aren't just cameos.
No.
The reviews highlight some really strong performances.
Yeah, like Barbaro really captures Baez's strength and presence, and Fanning brings a lot of depth to Russo, showing the complexities of their relationship. It makes you think about the impact these women had on Dylan, both personally and creatively.
Speaking of impact, we have to talk about that scene where Dylan's supposedly writing Blowin' in the Wind. The Time Review mentioned this. He's in his underwear, just casually composing one of the most iconic songs of all time.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how the film puts those moments of creative brilliance right alongside Dylan's more complicated personal life. It's almost like the movie is saying, yes, he's difficult, but look at the genius he produces.
Right, yeah.
But it also brings up some questions about how accurate the movie is historically.
Yeah, because the Judas shout, which I think most Dylan fans associate with his electric set at Newport,
Right.
actually happened later in Manchester, right?
Correct. The Guardian points that out, noting the film takes some liberties with the timeline. Now, it could just be a way to condense events and make the story flow better.
Yeah.
But knowing that Dylan was involved with the project,
Right.
it makes you wonder if those changes were intentional,
Yeah, could he be using those changes to shape how people understand that pivotal moment?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
And speaking of going electric, the film portrays it as more of a rebellion than a natural evolution.
Yeah, which makes sense, considering the huge backlash he got at the time. Yeah. Talk about a turning point.
Yeah, he was basically rejecting the genre that made him famous. And that defiance, as the Time Review put it, is presented as thrilling.
Right.
It's almost like the film is celebrating that rebellious spirit, that refusal to be put in a box.
Which, when you think about it, is very Dylan.
Exactly.
So we've got this unconventional biopic, a really captivating performance by Chalamet,
Yeah.
a fascinating look at Dylan's complexities,
Right.
and this whole question of artistic freedom versus expectations. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think we should dig into those relationships with the women in Dylan's life a bit more.
Yeah.
They offer a really unique perspective on the man behind the music.
Right.
The one who's trying to balance those big artistic ambitions with his personal life.
Especially Joan Baez and Sylvie Russo.
Right.
The AP News review talked about how they're constantly challenging Dylan's carefully constructed persona, that whole mysterious minstrel image.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? They see right through the act, call him out on always hiding. But it seems like Dylan isn't completely opposed to it either.
Oh, really?
He's drawn to their attempts to understand him.
Okay.
But at the same time, he seems to be afraid of being truly known.
So he wants to be seen, but also fears vulnerability.
Yeah. And it really plays into that theme of unknowability we see throughout the film.
Right.
Makes those moments of genuine connection even more powerful.
Yeah.
The AP review mentions a scene where Baez wakes up and finds Dylan working on Blowing in the Wind, still in his underwear, completely lost in the creative process.
Oh, wow.
She joins in, harmonizing with him.
It's like we're seeing a side of Dylan we rarely get to see.
Right.
A moment of shared intimacy amidst all the chaos of their relationship.
Exactly. And it kind of acknowledges the contributions of women in the folk music scene that are often overlooked.
Yeah.
These women weren't just muses.
Right.
They were artists themselves,
Yeah.
influencing Dylan's sound and shaping his creative journey.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about how the film handled Dylan's music.
Okay.
Beyond the performances, how does it capture the essence of his sound? That evolution from those early folk tunes to the electric energy of his later work.
This is where I think director James Mangold's expertise really shines through. The Guardian review mentions this seemingly insignificant detail, Dylan buying a toy whistle on the street.
A toy whistle.
Yeah, sounds random, right?
Okay, I'm intrigued.
But later, we hear that same whistle at the beginning of the recording session for Highway 61 Revisited.
Oh, wow.
It's such a small thing, but it says a lot about how well Mangold understands Dylan's creative process.
Yeah, it's like he's inviting us to listen more closely.
Right.
To appreciate those unexpected elements that make Dylan's music so unique.
Exactly, and to understand that there was intention behind those seemingly spontaneous choices.
So connecting this back to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
It seems like A Complete Unknown is less about explaining Bob Dylan and more about embracing all his contradictions.
You got it. The film really revels in those paradoxes. The folk hero who rejects folk music, the poet who hides as much as he reveals, the genius who could also be a real jerk.
And in the end, maybe the most authentic Dylan is the one who stays elusive.
Right. The one we can never fully figure out.
Yeah?
The Time reviewer put it this way: the fact-checked heart is no heart at all.
Wow, I like that.
It's this idea that if you try to force Dylan into a neat little understandable story, you're missing the point. You're diminishing his artistry.
Okay, but how does this resonate with you, the listener? Why should this biopic, with its unique take on Dylan, matter to you?
Well, I think the film asks some important questions about how we approach art and artists in general.
Yeah.
Do we need to fully understand the person to appreciate their work? Can we embrace the mystery, the contradictions, the parts that remain hidden?
And what about us as fans?
Yeah.
Is it just blind adoration?
Right.
Or is it about engaging critically with the artist's work, even the parts that make us uncomfortable?
Exactly. And with Dylan, that discomfort often came from his willingness to challenge what people expected. He pushed boundaries, evolved, and sometimes even alienated those who thought they knew him best.
Think about that controversial electric set at Newport in '65.
Right.
The film really frames it as a deliberate act of rebellion, not just a natural progression.
Yeah, he was making a statement.
Right.
Almost like a declaration of independence.
And that statement, intentional or not, transformed folk music forever.
Yeah, it really did.
Cemented Dylan's status as a cultural iconoclast.
Absolutely.
The film doesn't shy away from the anger and disappointment it caused among those folk purists.
Right.
You know, the ones who felt betrayed by his use of electric instruments.
But there's a thrill in watching that defiance,
Yeah.
that refusal to be contained.
Right.
I think that's at the heart of Dylan's enduring appeal.
But it also brings up a tough question. Does an artist's intention matter more than how the audience interprets it?
That's a good one.
Can we separate the art from the artist, especially when the artist is as complex and contradictory as Bob Dylan?
Those are some great questions to think about.
Yeah.
And the film doesn't give us easy answers.
Right.
It encourages us to wrestle with those complexities.
Yeah.
To acknowledge that creative evolution can be messy, controversial, and even painful.
But ultimately, it's through that struggle that willingness to break free from what's expected,
Right.
that something truly innovative emerges.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how different music might be today if Dylan had stayed with traditional folk music.
Absolutely. And while some people might say that his music lost its power when he plugged in,
Yeah.
the film suggests the opposite.
Oh, yeah.
You can't deny the rawness, the energy, the sheer force of those electric performances.
Right.
It's like he tapped into a different kind of energy, one that resonated with the whole new generation.
And that brings us back to the central question of this deep dive. Did Dylan's music really lose its power when he picked up that electric guitar? Does going electric diminish the power of music that was originally intended to be acoustic? Is it even possible to separate the art from the artist when the artist is as complex and controversial as Bob Dylan?
You know, that's a question people have been arguing about for decades.
Right.
And this film doesn't try to give us all the answers,
Yeah.
but it definitely keeps that conversation going.
Which I think is the point.
Yeah.
It's not about ending the debate. It's about exploring it,
Right.
engaging with it, maybe even challenging our own assumptions about music, art, and the whole creative process.
And that's where the film's look at the folk purist perspective comes in.
Right.
It doesn't shy away from showing the anger and disappointment of those who felt Dylan betrayed the folk movement by, selling out to the electric guitar.
Yeah, but it's interesting how the film also kind of hints at the limitations of that purist perspective.
Right.
It's almost like it's asking, can art really stay frozen in time?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes Dylan's evolution so fascinating.
Yeah.
He didn't just change his sound, he changed what people thought folk music could be.
And by doing so, he really opened the door for so many other artists to break free from those genre boxes and explore new sounds.
You can't overstate how big of a ripple effect that decision had.
Yeah.
And I think the film does a great job of capturing that energy and excitement of that moment.
Right.
That sense of possibility that Dylan unleashed.
Let's be honest, even if you're not a huge Dylan fan,
Right.
there's something captivating about seeing Chalamet embodying that electric stage presence.
Oh, yeah.
The reviews talked about his swagger, the intensity of his performance.
Yeah, it's like he's channeling Dylan's rebellious spirit.
The Guardian review even compared Chalamet singing to his guitar playing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, saying he had to learn to play convincingly,
Wow.
not just fake it.
Yeah, it's another level of authenticity he brings to the role.
Which speaks to the idea that Dylan's music wasn't just about the words and melodies.
Right.
It was a whole attitude, a way of being in the world.
That transcends any genre or instrument.
And maybe that's what the film is really trying to tell us.
What's that?
That while we can debate about Dylan going electric forever,
Yeah.
the essence of his artistry is in his willingness to push those boundaries,
Right.
defy expectations, and embrace the unknown.
So, what do you think, listener?
Yeah, did Dylan betray folk music by going electric?
Or did he expand it?
Does his music lose its power when it's amplified?
Or does it gain a new kind of energy? There are no easy answers.
And that's what makes it so interesting.
A complete unknown invites us to really grapple with those questions, appreciate how complex Dylan's artistry is,
Yeah.
and recognize that sometimes the most profound art comes from discomfort, from being willing to challenge the way things are,
Right.
and embrace the unpredictable.
And maybe that's the most important thing we can take away from this film
Yeah.
and from Dylan's legacy. That true creative expression often means stepping outside our comfort zones,
Absolutely.
questioning what we believe,
Right.
and embracing the chance of being misunderstood.
Or even criticized.
Because it's in those moments when we're willing to risk it all that we really find out who we are
As artists.
as individuals.
And as a society.
So as you watch A Complete Unknown and listen to Bob Dylan's music,
Whether it's acoustic.
or electric,
Yeah.
ask yourself, what boundaries are you willing to push?
What expectations are you ready to defy?
And what unknown territories are you ready to explore?